Recently, I did a video on true RMS in meters and why a true RMS meter is necessary if you're making measurements on a waveform that is not sinusoidal. A link to that video is in the description of this video. It is on multimeters, digital multimeters, and explains why you need true RMS when you do have a distorted waveform. In that video, I mentioned that there aren't very many applications where you need a multimeter for measuring voltage, because most of us run into voltage signals that are always going to be sinusoidal. You rarely will have an occurrence where that waveform is not sinusoidal and you would need the true RMS function. However, I believe everybody should have a true RMS clamp meter. The reason for that is most of us are running into LED lighting or fluorescent lighting in our homes. Instead of the old standard incandescent lighting, you've got these CFL bulbs all over the place. And the current that these bulbs is not sinusoidal. So to show what the current looks like when you've got these different bulbs on, I've actually put a resistor in series with my cord so I can measure the voltage across this resistor, and that will give me a waveform on my scope of what the current waveform looks like. So if I switch in incandescent bulbs, it's a linear load. Those incandescent bulbs are going to have linear draw on that AC waveform, so I've got a sinusoidal current waveform on these incandescent bulbs. But if I switch in CFL bulbs, look at what that waveform looks like. It's anything but sinusoidal. Very spiky. These guys do not have a linear load on them, and this is what the current waveform looks like. So a clamp meter will measure this waveform a lot differently than it will measure this waveform if it is not a true RMS clamp meter. So let's take a look at how the different clamp meters would measure these two waveforms. So for this setup, I'm still going to use my board here with my incandescent and my fluorescent bulbs. I'm just running it where the lights are away from my setup. You can see that I'm still going through the resistor for the scope into the meters, and I've got the scope and the meters there. I'm just doing it this way so I can switch the lights on and you can still see what's happening without the glare of the lights interfering with the camera. So right now I have the incandescent lights on. You can see that I have a clean sinusoidal current waveform on my scope because the incandescents represent a linear load. My RMS clamp meter is measuring 1.8 amps. My true RMS clamp meter is measuring 1.8 amps. So let me switch off the incandescents and put the fluorescents on. Now I have the distorted waveform, and my RMS meter is only measuring 1.6 amps, where my true RMS meter is measuring 2.1 amps. That means that the RMS meter is off by 25% from what the actual current reading is. Just to show you this isn't a difference in brands, let me take off this RMS and put on another true RMS meter. And as you can see, both true RMS meters are measuring approximately the same, 2.07 amps on this guy, 2.09 amps on this. So both true RMS meters are reading this distorted current waveform properly. So here's another example why this is important. Nonlinear loads are found on a lot more items than just CFL bulbs. Your computer has a switching power supply, your television set has a switching power supply, chargers for your cell phones are switching power supplies. Let's say you've got a 15 amp breaker in your house and this breaker keeps blowing and you're wondering why. And here I've got a room simulated where I've got several computers plugged in, CFL light bulbs powering up, a television set on. So I go on that breaker, that 15 amp breaker that's blowing with my RMS clamp meter, and I see 14.6 amps. And I think, wow, that's close to the limit of 15 amp breaker, but it's not over 15 amps. This breaker shouldn't be blowing. But if you were to put a true RMS clamp meter on, this line is actually drawing 23.3 amps. Now, like we did before, let's put on another clamp meter just to show it's not a particular brand of clamp meter. Here's a Ideal, also 23.3 amps. It doesn't have a backlight on it, so it's a little bit harder to see, but it's a 23 amp reading. So this is why I think it's really important to have a clamp meter that is true RMS. If you really want to understand why these readings are different and a little bit more about true RMS, check out my video on true RMS on multimeters. There is a link to that video in the description of this video. and I should have a link to that video at the end of this video as well. Thank you. There's a lot more to learn about selecting the right meter or how to use your current meter more effectively. Make sure you subscribe to this channel to learn more about meters